Yeah.
So, all right. So let's get started. So I'm here today with Professor Perbi, who is a big sister to me. So I just want to put that out there. And her family and our family, the Menu family, have been very close for many, many years on many different levels. But Professor Perbi is a scholar in history. She used to be the head of the history department, or you might still be the head, I'm not sure, but she's the head of the history department. And she is a known authority in history with a specialization in women in slavery, indigenous slavery, which is something maybe if we have time we'll get to, because I think a lot of people don't really understand the difference between indigenous slavery and the slavery everybody knows about. And she's written many books. You can Google her name and you find out what those books are. She's very much passionate about, again, women, history, and slavery. And she's been very kind to spend some time with us today to share, in her own words, the history of Legon University Primary and that era. So welcome, Professor Perbi. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing good.
Good, good. So why don't we start off, if you can tell us a little bit about your early memories of Legon University Primary, how because when I knew you, you're already there. So if you can help me understand how you got there, I think that will be a good introductory point, and then we can take it and move forward with that.
Okay. I've spent all my life in Legon. And my father came to Legon in 1952. And I was a 3-month baby. So I spent my babyhood to adulthood all at Legon. But initially, there were some private schools in Achimota. And that is where some of us started our nursery education. And then later, when the university primary was built in 1957, we came back to campus. But all the teachers were foreigners. It was later in the early 1960s that we got some Africans to join us and some Ghanaians to teach us. So we learned a lot of things that were really foreign in terms of the nursery rhymes. And sometimes I was asked to act some of these things. And you can imagine little Miss Muffet sat on the tuffet, all those kinds of things, So it was much later in the primary school that we got other Ghanaian African teachers coming in, and some of them teaching us, some of the poems we can say, and, Kwekwa Nancy and all the stories about him and so on. So we had a mixture of expatriate and local teachers, yes. And one of the early things we didn't have were prefects. The school just ran automatically. And then when there was a speech day, the teachers and the headmaster would decide who should say a vote of thanks for the people who came. And inevitably, I find myself being asked to do that. And it was like I was very vocal, so I was asked to do that.
From an early age.
From an early age, And then I remember in the early beginnings, the late Mr. Behu taught us the national anthem. And when he finished, he asked that whether anybody could sing it. And I was able to sing. So later on, he asked the teachers who I was. And they said, Nketiah's daughter. Oh, and then he said, oh, I'm not surprised. Okoto, Omwanoma. The crab doesn't give birth of a bird. And one of the interesting things about early schooling in Legon was that we didn't wear school uniforms. we wore any dress, But at a point, my mother decided that she would give us uniforms, although it was not part of the syllabus, requirements. So she sat down herself and sewed uniforms. So we felt a bit odd walking through the school, but we managed that also as well,
So just a quick,
initially,
you finish. There's one thing I wanted to bring up, but you finish, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, bring it up because I'm talking from memory. So
okay, but one thing I sparked my brain was, so these expert teachers initially who came in, and from where you sit today, right, after a lifetime of achievement and experience and exposure, how do you think they came into Ghana? What was their mindset? Did they come in were they idealistic people coming in trying to do good? Did they come in with more a different kind of mindset? I mean, how was that interaction? Because the point you made about the nursery rhymes, was quite interesting. And I'm trying to think, did they come in and try and learn more about our customs?
I was a very small girl, so I really didn't know what their perspectives were, It was like they taught us, so we were imbibing what they taught us in school. Although I'm sure there was a syllabus they had to also look at, And then apart from sitting in the classroom and learning, there were extracurricular activities. Sometimes there were days when we went for swimming in Ashwater School. And then there were days when we just had something like play, especially Christmas time. There always be this Christmas play, in the school. Actually, growing up in Legon and in the school, it was mostly fun. It wasn't like very strict, obey this, the syllabus hasn't been covered, It was more like that. And I think it was when we got to secondary school that we were exposed to more things, So really, what I remember more is fun, learning and fun. And, there was also drumming and dancing for us, So I saw it on a lighter side.
Okay.
It wasn't that strict, And then, of course, it was, the school was built for staff. And not all the staff lived on campus, but I remember we lived on campus right from the beginning. So we would walk to school and return to home walking and conversing. And one of the things I remember I used to do was that there were a lot of fruit trees in Legon, Yoyi, Atia, and so on. And anytime we're going home, I would climb a tree and make sure that I had some of the fruits to eat before going home. So my remembrance of school is really one of fun, learning seriously and all that. My memories don't go that far,
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think Akosua has a question here that I'm just going to throw out to you, which is sort of comparing the style of teaching then to what you see now from your experience, maybe through, I'm sure, you have some friends who have children who are going through the system, you're aware of what's going through the system. How would you compare that? That seems to have been a lot more playful, more fun. It seems as if we are a lot more regimented now. Would you agree on that? Or?
The fun, I think, is still there a bit. But, these days of competition, when people want the best schools and so on, the teachers have been more regimental because the better you do, the more chances you get to go to a school of your choice.
Mm-hmm.
These good first-class schools. So there's fun, but there's also, seriousness.
Okay. When did you come out of university primary? And this must give me a year, please. It was in the 60s?
1964.
64, okay. And then,
64.
I'm sorry, Akosua, I've forgotten what secondary school you went to. Was it Ashmota or?
Yes, it was Ashmota School.
Okay. So you were still pretty close to, to campus anyway. So
yeah.
If you can give us a sense of, now not even really about university primary, but just that era in the context of Legon, being obviously academic, intellectual hotspot, being that Ghana was going through the 60s was very tumultuous in terms of politics. Do you remember, was it something that registered on you at all, or you didn't really, it just went right over your head and, life was just a normal life?
School was just fun.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't think of, the politics going around us and so on. It was all going to school, studying, and having fun. It wasn't that regimental,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's for my childhood memories. This is what I remember.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Were you always in Lower Hill, or did you move around?
First, it was at Little Legon.
Okay.
And then we moved to Legon Hill.
Okay.
And then from Legon Hill, we moved to Lower Hill.
Okay.
So from 1952 to 57, we're in Little Legon.
Mm-hmm.
And then 57 to 1964, we're in Legon Hill. Mm-hmm. And then 1964 till my father retired, we moved to Lower Hill.
Okay.
Now, and then, my memories of Legon is all about fun. And I remember in secondary school, after leaving the primary schools and going to secondary school, there were times when we had decided to organize some fun on campus. So all the students who are on holidays will come together, and we use the African Studies dance hall as a place to have parties and so on. It is the fun things I remember more than, the academic was not, it wasn't like we were under pressure, steady. There was pressure, there was fun, so we had to mix it up. When I got to Achimota School, one of the things that followed me from university primary to Achimota was the name Nketia. As soon as the seniors saw me, they called you and said, girl, what's your name? Akosua Nketia. And inevitably, they'll add Akosua Nketia sing, Akosua Nketia dance. So it was like what we're doing, in primary school went across to secondary school as well, So you can see that we studied, yes, art and craft, plays and so on. But it wasn't so strict that, you were learning and you were having headaches and that kind of thing. So my memory really is one of fun, studying and having fun, more than that. I'm sure you can get other people to also contribute. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you one thing though, which is on the forum, and again, not to minimize people who growing up, we all know, all of us, may grow up and have memories that maybe sometimes a little bit traumatic, but in general, on the forum, you tend to get a lot of the same sentiments about growing up in Legon as being a place which was quite magical, what a community. You could go into people's homes, without even asking questions. You didn't have like just your house, you had many homes, and walking around and climbing trees for fruits, a very common area. So I think it was definitely a place that people have fond memories of, which is part of what I think brings us together. Okay, yes. So if we can talk a little bit more about the community, but I also want to maybe do a little bit of a shift, because earlier on you mentioned your whole life has been in Legon, and people should remember that you grew up in Legon. I believe you did go to Legon, and
Yes.
you left at Legon. So from that point of view, as being a part of the academic staff system, how did that change, right? Looking at it, from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, how did the community change in your eyes as you progressed in your career?
Well, I think most of us, all of us had to pass through secondary education. And then, of course, not all of us came back to Legon. Others, we all scattered, But I think one of the things that kept us together was cordiality. And our parents lived in communities that were close. And I realized growing up that everybody was everybody's concern and everybody's friend, So my memories of Legon is more of friendship, togetherness, encouraging one another, And it was only later that some teachers decided that they would do extra classes to help students, move on. But my memory of Legon is all one of fun. And I'm sure others can add bits and pieces to what I've shared.
Okay, that's true. So, and maybe we should talk a little bit about, maybe a little bit more detail about those extra classes. Do you remember some of the teachers from that time who maybe started up these extra classes?
I remember somebody like Miss Mensa. She did not only teach during class hours, but she also taught poems and plays. Mm-hmm. So she was somebody who brought some innovations into the teaching. That mm-hmm. was not just study, but then she taught students how to enact plays,
Okay.
And then there was this white American teacher Mrs. Reitman. She liked the art and craft thing. So sometimes she let us do some needlework and so on, and then later on, when we were going to class 7, the common entrance class, we got a teacher who was Nigerian and who was very strict and used the cane to beat us sometimes, Mr. Oyetunji. And Mr. Oyetunji was very strict. And we hadn't experienced that in school. It was learning, but fun, learning and taking life easy, And all of us reached places where we had reached because we had teachers who were concerned about us, who cared for us, who corrected us, and so on. But then he started the cane. And I remember during break time, he used to send me to go and buy bananas. The banana sellers and the banana sellers were around. And I was the one every break time, snack time, at about 10:30, 11, he will send me. And then one day, some of the classwork we did not dive very well for him. So he decided that all of us who didn't do too well will have a few lashes in our hands. So the boys took it through their back and we had it through our hands. And then a number of us got upset and decided that we'll go home. So after the break, we didn't continue the schooling, we just walked home. And I think our parents complained to the headmaster, and later on they talked to the teachers to be more lenient with the way they handle us. Those are the things I remember. So it wasn't strict learning and so on, yeah.
Okay, so making a shift to more the secondary school days, I know you went to Ashmota, but when you came back for long vacation, what was the life like in Legon at that point? Or, was there, because everybody was pretty much going to boarding school, I would assume, right? So maybe you come back home, how would you characterize the interactions then?
So what happened was that most people would visit colleagues on campus, visit some homes. Sometimes some of the mothers will invite us into the kitchen to help us to cook, help us to eat. I think Legon, my memory of Legon is one of a big family where we didn't only learn, but we had time to play, had time to interact, had fun. So this is what I remember more, and I'm sure others can also chip in.
Yep, for sure. Yes, I think those are some of the memories we all have. Yeah. Of
I'm sure you can add, Akosua can add.
But
it tells you how easy we've taken life.
Yes.
We've taken things coolly and easily, and that kind of relaxing mood helps us to move on, in life.
Okay. Let me actually, Sister Cruz, let me ask you a question here, which is, because one of the things that we've among our community ourselves, right, that has come up from time to time is how little, at least among our generation, and I have a feeling it may differ from maybe later generations, but our generation or even older, there wasn't a lot of call it marriages or relationships between people, right? It's like, and do you think the notion of us being this tight-knit family community, you think that affected in some ways the chances of people actually pairing up? Because you would think that people who grow up to some degree may end up having a connection and making a union, a long-term union.
I think the fact that we went to secondary schools also played a part, because some of the friendships start in secondary school. And so I think I know of a few who, because we're also having some parties during the long vac and so on, would become friends and eventually marry. But I think a lot of it happened more with people we met in secondary school, or people later we came to meet in the university, So there was some bonding, as it were.
Okay. No, that's an excellent point about the boarding school system, which is quite pertinent right now with the conversations going on about the nature of Ghana education, the FHS and all that. So definitely that has an impact on people's lives for a long time. So, so when you started teaching in Legon and in the history department, as a young lecturer, right? People knew your name too, obviously, right? I hope they didn't ask you to dance or sing at that point, to be honest. but if you may ask one question, when did you start teaching there? Was it in the 80s or?
Yeah, I started teaching 1981.
81, okay, I thought so. So those were obviously very difficult times for Ghana, right? How did you handle that? From an academic point of view, from an economic point of view,
It was not easy. What the watchword was planning. It meant that you always had to plan your things very well. The campus staff, the senior members, organized teamwork where even getting provisions would be difficult. So we organized a team, and then they went out to get provisions, and then we found a way of sharing it amongst each other, And then, of course, 83 was a hunger time. And that is something I don't think we want to remember, where it was really, really difficult getting food. And where many of us were not corn eaters, but we learned how to eat corn, learned how to eat kenke. And those were the days when you heard that there was going to be kenke somewhere, you went to enjoy the queue. And where we lived, Kutubabi Pig Farm, opposite her house, there was a woman who did the kinky. So what we did was that she would come and whisper to us when she's preparing the kinky. And then we'll give her money in advance. So that when she's ready, then she calls us quietly, and then you go to the house quietly and collect the kinky.
Nicodemus.
We've gone through, pardon?
Nicodemusly.
Nicodemusly. And so many of us who were parents were more concerned about our children's welfare. Sometimes we sacrifice the food for them to eat, you know. So that is how Legon, we had cooperating. We cooperated and then decided to organize some, at least provisions for staff. It helped a lot. It helped a lot, you know. But there have been hard times. It's only God taking. Yes. Okay.
I think Akosua has a question she wants to bring up, which is Legon Women's Society. Do you remember that? Do you remember what how that started? Did you have any connection with that?
Because I was a young girl, I knew that our parents were involved, but in terms of the depth of it, I was on the periphery, you know. And especially marrying and having children, you know, you don't think of, we left it to our mothers, that our mothers would be taking care of that, having fun. Especially, I remember on Christmas days, they would make sure that they brought a Christmas tree to the main gate, planted it in the runabout just before you enter the gate.
Yes.
And then decorate it with some flowers and so on. And then I also remember that they had weighing sections at the staff, the staff quarters, where they allowed all members of staff who had babies to come to weigh the children, see how they were doing. And sometimes they gave out powdered milk and so on. So they also did that. But my mother was more involved with it than I am. I was, you know, I enjoyed the goodies, but I didn't take part in that, you know.
Okay.
So it was a big help to, yeah.
Excellent. So the other thing I want to touch upon, which may not be immediately relevant to Legon per se, but I think it's interesting because it shows helps people build a fuller picture of you, is your research interest, right, with women and slavery, indigenous slavery. Maybe if you can let people understand what at the core that is about, right? Because again, myself, I'm not very much aware of indigenous slavery. I know at a high level what it could be, but it's not something that is front and center. But I think a lot more people know slavery or chattel slavery, you know, that was the whole Africa, America, so on and so forth. So if you can tell people a little bit about that and why you decided to specialize in that, I think that'll be interesting.
I think my interest came from my lecturers, you know. Normally, when you are writing a thesis, you want something that is new or something that will appeal to people. And I remember some of my lecturers encouraging me to, the Atlantic slavery, we all seem to know. But what happened indigenous was that there was also a system where within Ghana, within Africa, you know, slaves were used in the house and on the farms. The difference was that slaves became part of the family. It wasn't like you've come from somewhere we don't mind you, you know, but they became part of the family. And the work they did was because of the needs in their families. And I found it interesting that when you went on the farm, you went to farm, for example, it was not only the slaves who were farming, but the owners' wives or wife and children will also take part in the farming, and then there were those who would harvest the crops and then go to the market and sell. And it also involved both the slave and the free. It's not an easy thing to understand, where the difference is that it is chattel slavery. The house owner outside Ghana has no relationship with the slave. It's just work, 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 work. But in Ghana and many parts of Africa, they became part of the family. And sometimes the house owners even marry them, because you could marry as many women as you liked, So it's important to see that in terms of how slaves were acquired, sometimes through war, raise and kidnapping, sometimes there were even markets where people could actually go and buy slaves. There was a famous one in the north. It was the Salaga market. Again, a lot of them were, people who had been brought through warfare and so on. But then in terms of treatment, and of course, you can't glorify slavery, There were always pros and cons. That is how I see it.
So in that context, the slaves weren't necessarily paid, were they? I mean, they were part of the household. You're not paying your household. They were maybe paid in kind. You had a roof, you had food given to you, but in return, you expected to carry out certain duties for the household in which you were based. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you were not paid, but those who went trading with the owners, sometimes when the owners were very happy with the way they were exuberant, and very courteous about the work, they would also give them some money to say, do some trading of your own as well.
Okay.
So that was, yeah.
And the children, sorry, but for the children of these slaves, would they still be slaves, or that you couldn't generalize? In some cases, they could be slaves, in some cases, they could be free to go. I mean, how that works for the next generation?
Sometimes some of the slaves within the household married themselves. Sometimes the owners looked at that. So once they married themselves, their children were a set family within the household. But then if it was the owner who had married the slave, then the children were free. The children were free to, because they were the owner's family. So they were free to stay in the household, join the parents' occupation. If it was trading, if it was farming, they all worked together, It's not an easy thing to be imbibe, but it's what history teaches us that we do, And of course, you can't compare the fact of treatment to what happened outside the Atlantic, where the owners had nothing to do with the slaves. It was chattel. The slaves were regarded as beasts of burden. So that is the point where the difference is coming, between what happened in Africa and what happened across Africa, And it takes a while. I myself personally, it took me a long while to imbibe and accept that something like that could happen. But it's taken me years of studying and realize that there were checks and balances, and sometimes if you did not treat your slave very well, the slave had the right to go to the chiefs of palace and to complain, So there were some humanitarian things about it. But you see, it's not something I can justify or pat anybody on the back and say, yeah, yours is the best. It was a human institution, a human thing. So that is how it all happened. Yeah.
So when you look at maybe even in my time growing up and up till today, it feels like culturally and economically, we still have this institution of house help, right? With people having people in the house to help them. I'm trying to see if there's a thread between that and that indigenous slavery. And I'm not trying to say it's the same thing. I'm just saying, is there a thread there, And is that really because of, is it more a matter of just human nature and economics? Because, I know, in my time, my own mother, right, will have house help, and, sometimes they come and to help them get some training on some trade, and then at some point they graduate and move on. And you could sort of say that was a win-win, for them, for everybody. But again, it's a little bit of he said, a charged topic, right? So, but I want to make sure you're very sensitive to that. But I would like to get your thoughts on how you see that present day sort of domestication arrangements, and if in any way at all, how if there's a link to what we know as being indigenous, or as from that slavery point of view.
I think now people are more careful in terms of, if you want somebody to stay with you, the kind of questions you have to ask and the kind of treatment you need to give is very, very important. Now, a lot of people are going to school. So in fact, getting house helps is very difficult now, because a lot of people are going to school now and they want to continue with their education, or, find a job to do. So it's very, very difficult. Now, if you need a house help, you have to pay quite a huge sum for that. And then, of course, you have to have an agreement that some of them will say, I'm coming to work for 3 years. After that, I want to leave and go and learn how to sew, be a seamstress, or be a hairdresser, So the pattern has changed now. And it's not easy at all to get house helps now. It's not easy at all, because everybody is going to school. Everybody is, finding some work to do. Everybody is trying to get the best she can, So what is happening now is that sometimes you may have to go into your relatives and see whether you can take them to school and let them help you at the same time at home. A lot of things are changing.
So it's funny you say that about school, because it just feels to me that Ghanaians, we love going to school, right? And obviously, over the years, more and more people are going to school. Now, and I think I think everybody said that's a good thing. The question, though, is how can we continue to improve on the schooling so that people coming out, right, better prepared, right, for being productive members in the Ghanaian context, and not so much, coming out and having a bunch of people graduating, and meanwhile the society needs are not being met by those people. So nobody really gains from that. What should we be doing differently, in your opinion, as somebody who obviously has worked in education for most, if not all of your life? What should we be doing differently to prepare people, or what should the country be doing differently to make sure that it graduates people who are better suited for its needs?
That's a very difficult one.
Today, I'm hearing you because
it's a difficult one, because it's not everybody who would want to study up to a certain level, when the opportunity is good. But I remember I myself, I didn't have a problem with my parents, but my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, she was more concerned about, after finishing secondary school, marrying and having children than, continue your education. And I think it always creates some agitation in the homes when grandmothers think that you've had enough of schooling, because they don't have that experience. So after secondary school, it's okay, marry. And I went to see my grandchildren before I die, So we are always in a dilemma as to what to choose, what not to do. And in the case of, in my case, because I was the eldest of all the grandchildren, my grandmother was just waiting for the day when I'll marry and have children, you know. And then here was I, after first degree, going to do a master's and then trying to continue. And she was quite upset till we had to explain to her that things are changing and that if you are gifted with academia or your mind can go that far, why not? So everybody and what they can do. So you have to accept everybody and their capabilities, what they can do, where they can reach, what you can do to help. And then it makes life worth living.
Yes, it's funny you should say that because, in fact, yesterday and today on a forum on WhatsApp, there was a very interesting conversation about societal expectations of women when it comes to marriage and how that has all of these ramifications, you know, in terms of relationships and so on and so forth. So this is extremely apt, and I'm sure people will sort of it will resonate with people. So Akosua, why don't you ask that question yourself? Because I think you can put it better. Akosua has a question she just sent me in chat, you know. So I think
I'm being troublesome, am I?
Oh no. Yeah, keeping me on
Not
point.
at all.
So, yeah.
No, I just
Akosua,
thinking, you know, we're talking about the education and you, sorry?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, we're talking about the education. And I remember when you started, you talked about the transition with the expats, etc., and the fact that you were being asked to act out poems such as Little Miss Muffet, etc. And I'm just actually trying to gauge again, have we really evolved? Has our educational system actually really evolved from the Western basis? Because I'm quite certain we're still telling them to say the Baba black sheep, and they're telling them to talk about goosey gander and all these things that frankly have no meaning whatsoever. But I'm not there, so I would like to get your perspective, really.
I think it's a mixture of things. Sometimes you really wish that things would go a certain way, but it doesn't always happen that way. And the fact of our history, that we've been colonized before, we've had experience with the British. Look at it, we are speaking English.
I blame my parents. I blame my parents for that.
Okay, so, well, so what I'm saying is that there are some things you cannot take away. There are some things that have been ingrained in our history. And I think that to make life easier, a bit of this, and life goes on. It's all right, because, for example, I can't say, I'll go to the lecture room and teach in P. Sometimes there are some words that will come as you teach, you know, and then you have to explain it in English that there are some proverbial things you want to share, and it comes better if you speak your own language, you know. But I think the mixture of things is really what is happening now, and it's very difficult to. There are some things you cannot put a handle on and say, stop, I'll do it this way. Sometimes you have to take life easy and let things flow as they go on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I.
Yes.
I just want to ask one other question though. I agree with you that things sometimes have to naturally evolve. But I guess I just get the sense though that I'm not sure if our GES or the educational system is truly even open to letting things evolve. Because I want to see the elevation of poems like Cricket Soya, My Friend Little Drum, Cricket Soya, and all of those things being given more prominence gradually than the goosey ganders of this world. But it seems like I don't see a conscious shift. And I just want your perspective on that.
And that's a very difficult, it's a very difficult question to answer because so many things are evolving and muddying the water. So and then you can't stand alone and say, mine is this way, so let's all, take it that way. But I suppose gradually, I know some of colleagues who took their children to private schools because they wanted it in a certain way, and others who would also go to what you call the government school because they think that there will be a balance this way. So I think it's a mixture of things. But take it easy, baby.
But if I may just jump in here too, which is, it's funny
I
to say
can see
about,
the revolutionary in me coming out.
Yeah,
but I'll tell you, because when I moved back to Ghana, I was working there, and I was talking to my mom, which was one of the more, I think one of the best things I ever did, coming back as an adult and reconnecting with Ghana and with her. And we're talking about tree, and my tree is limited, like you said, you break into English and tree. But I remember one afternoon sitting with her and just going through examples of things that I thought there were no tree equivalent. And there always is, right?
Yeah.
But it's the context, right? Like air conditioner, for instance, right? The way you describe it is you got to tell the story of what it's doing and how, it's something that's supposed to cool you down under a certain kind of weather. So it ends up being a pretty long word, but it is there, but we take the shortcuts and say air conditioner, and that's part of it. So I know that there's some people doing their best to keep some of these languages alive and vibrant, and we should support them. Now, before we sign off, which we have to do in a few minutes, I do want to talk about African studies, obviously because of Prof, your dad. In this context, we're talking about, keeping our indigenous roots. Where is the Institute of African Studies today? I think people should know more about it, right? And I would love for you to share what you know about it so that, we can spread the word about what they do. And maybe if there are things somebody wants to support it, fine, they can find a way to do that.
Okay. Well, I'm not an authority in that area, but I know that there's the intellectual side of it, where some people are doing political science, history, economics, and so on. And there's also the practical side of it, where there's dance, music, and drama. And I think the whole idea of the dance, music, and drama started with my father in the early 60s, when he was in academia, and then realized that it's not just enough to teach theory, music theory, and so, but it would be better to also have the practical aspect. And he wrote a proposal to Nkrumah at that time, the early 1960s. And Nkrumah thought it was a very good idea. So the whole idea of music, dance, and drama evolved from the old man. So when there's the theoretical aspect, then there's also the practical aspect. And it's something that works together in the Institute, and it's grown, And the good thing now is that most first years will have, every first year student has to have a taste of the practicals of African studies.
Really? Okay.
So it's not as if they just enter and then leave. So the courses you want to do, you can continue, but all first year students are exposed to some practical things in terms of music. It's become either drama or dance or storytelling and so on. So I think efforts are being made to sort of do that.
Okay.
Things have grown much different than it was before, when it was strictly British, strictly academia, British, it's become a bit more flexible. And I think that's the good thing about it now. Yeah.
Okay. So I have one last question, and then if Akosua doesn't have anything, if you have any questions for us, obviously you can also ask that. But I'm thinking about the history department and some of the lecturers there. Are there any names you want to throw out in terms of your colleagues or people you remember fondly? Because maybe some of their children actually will be listening to this, so.
Hey. Professor Dauphiné is one of the people who, he taught for a long time in the department. And then Professor Dubois' children as well, Dr. Dakwa, Kofi Dakwa, and Akosua Perbi, Nketia.
Nice one.
Yes.
Okay.
All our children.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's nice. So, do you have any questions for us? Anything before we sign off?
Oh, I've enjoyed talking to you. It's made me think. Some of the things I haven't thought, it's helped me to think. And you've taken me through memory lane. I've gone through my childhood experience, remember what I can remember. And I'm very
and now it's all on videotape. So, excellent. Okay. I can send you a copy of this recording, so via the email address you gave me if you want, so if you want to play that back, obviously you can do that at your leisure. But thank you very much for your time, and your memories, and for, everything, for being a presence in all of our lives, in my life. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You're certainly a role model to all of us. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.